This encounter happened when I was quite young. I was still in elementary school, in either first or second grade. Back then, after school, I'd wait for my mom outside. Basically, I'd walk out the double doors and turn left, walking a little up the sidewalk, up to this purple donation box that was there. I sat next to it, exhausted because, at the time, I had a cold. Then, after a little while of waiting, the cliché white van pulls up in front of me. In the driver's seat was a white woman with dark curly hair. That's just about all I could see because, one, it was a long time ago, and my memory was pretty fuzzy, and two, I wasn't close enough to see, nor did I want to get any closer. Though I knew it was a woman in that van, and I had a gut feeling I shouldn't get any closer. Now, I don't remember exactly what the woman said, because it was so long ago, but it was something along the lines of, "Your mom wanted me to pick you up." But I wasn't really convinced. If my mom were to have someone else she knew pick me up, I would have known the person beforehand. She kept persisting that I get into the vehicle so she can take me home, but I just stood there, shaking my head no because I just couldn't process any words. Then, as if on cue, my mom's car comes up the school's driveway and gets behind the woman's van. The woman then asked me, "Is that your mom's car?" To which I nodded, and then she hit the gas and sped out of the school driveway. After seeing all this, my mom rolled down her window for me to get in the car, and I obeyed. A day or two after that happened, my mom and I went to the police about the situation. I was able to tell them the color of her skin and hair, but unfortunately I nor my mom couldn't get down the license plate of the van. So, therefore, she was never really found. Thinking back on that now, seeing my mother's terrified face when I got into her car, it really makes me think of what could have happened if I instead went with the lady in the van. If I decided to go with that lady, I probably wouldn't be able to talk about this today. I'm 17 now, and thankfully, I've never seen her or had any related experiences like that again. Okay, before I start, here's a bit of context to my story. My husband and I live in a small 2-floor house with 2 main entrances, one along the front and the other on the side, which opens up to the laundry room. When we're too busy or it's too late to walk our dog, we hook his collar onto the long line that's attached to one of the pipes on the corner of the house so he can use the bathroom. We used to do this from the door to our laundry room, but we noticed the large step from the door to the ground had been taking a toll on his hips. As a result, we started letting him out through the front door instead, since the porch is much closer to the ground. This particular night, I was home alone with my dog, and it was around midnight when I decided to let him outside one last time before going to bed. I hook him up to his line, close the door, and lock it before heading into the kitchen to put away the dishes. This was pretty routine. Even if he used the bathroom quickly, he liked to walk around along the front and side of the house for a few minutes before coming back inside. As I'm putting away the dishes, I hear a scratch on the door. It's how my dog signals he wants to come inside. So, I head over and let him back in. So I head over to let him back in. Since I've watched way too many scary movies, I always look through the door's peephole before opening the door. Out of habit, I look to check that my dog is in front of the door. Instead, I see a man staring very intently at the door handle. I freeze with my hand on the door handle. I don't know how much time went by, but then I heard another scratch, this one louder than the last. This kind of wakes me up from my initial shock, and I run to grab my cell phone. I called my husband to tell him what was happening. He was very confused. I probably wasn't explaining the situation very well. But he says he's heading home. This is when I realize my dog is still outside with this person. I head back to the front door, trying to make as little noise as possible, to check whether the stranger is still there. Just like before, he's standing there, head bowed, looking at the doorknob. I tiptoe over to the laundry room and slowly open the door as quietly as possible. I can't see my dog anywhere, and the side of my house is covered in gravel. I knew I couldn't step outside without making a lot of noise. With my heart still pounding in my chest, I go to the front door to keep an eye on the stranger and to get a better look at him. I considered calling the police, but I didn't feel like they would take me seriously, since all this man was doing was standing in front of my house. I tried taking a picture of him with my cell phone, but my camera was only able to take pictures of the peephole and not the images behind the glass. All of a sudden, the man looks up directly at me. I swear he knew I was there. He glares at me, then opens his mouth to show this taunting, malicious grin. He stood there that way for a few seconds. With that, he turns around and starts to walk down the street. I stay in the same place, almost expecting him to rush back and start pounding on the door. Luckily, my husband got back after a few minutes. Long story short, he convinced me to call the police, and we went out looking for our dog. It turns out this man had cut the end of the line connected to the pipe, and our dog decided this was a good time for him to explore my neighbor's backyard, which is where we found him. It's been 3 years since this happened, and we've since moved to a new house for unrelated reasons. The police weren't able to come up with any suspects. Ever since then, we take our dog on very long walks before the sun goes down. My sister and I recently stumbled across a memory during our weekly visits. We had just moved to a suburb, our first house in a decent but isolated part of town. She was 12, and I was 7. Mom let us take our white German Shepherd for a walk. I remember the sun was setting over the desert landscape, but we weren't worried. It was nice to be able to walk unsupervised down the street. We lavished in our freedom and took our time, letting Kodak sniff and investigate everything. We had just let him off the lead and were watching him chase a rabbit. I guess that's why we didn't hear the car pull up, nor the huge man that was sneaking up behind us. Kodak was a ways off, and suddenly he turned back and looked at us. And like a streak of white lightning, he raced back towards us. He flew. I'm not even sure if his feet touched the ground. He blasted past our waiting arms and landed on the man behind us. We turned, and Kodak was latched onto the man's arm. Kodak was a big dog with big teeth, and he was absolutely shredding this guy's arm. The man eventually got him to let go, and Kodak took a stance between us and the man. We apologized to the creep, not realizing what danger we were in. The man offered a shaky smile and told us we were good kids and stumbled off to his car. I remember there being a length of rope on the ground, which I now assume he had been holding. We looked at Kodak. He was growling and continued to growl until we made it home and he escorted us into the house. My sister told me, "Don't tell Mom, or they'll kill Kodak for biting someone." It was so naive. We thought we were protecting our pet, but in actuality, he saved one or both of us from a terrible fate. Much later, I learned my hometown is an area heavy in sexual predators and violent criminals. Many of the surrounding communities had passed legislation that wouldn't allow them to live in their towns, so they lived in ours. No wonder our house was so cheap. Knowing now what was likely the man's intentions, I'm glad Kodak was there. Kodak died a few years later. We buried him in the backyard and planted a tree over him.